Hello, this is Irv Shapiro with Make with Tech. And today I'm going to do a very interesting review. Not just because it's quite a good printer, 3D printer I'm reviewing, but also because of the nature of the manufacture. You see, this 3D printer, the AnkerMake M5, is made by the same company that makes the phone charger, the wireless phone charger, Anker, that I use every night. The same company that makes these headphones that I use quite often. The same company that makes security systems and AI-based robotic vacuum cleaners and large capacity power systems and solar cell driven rechargeable camping batteries and coolers, electronic coolers. Very interesting company. You see, Anker Innovations is a larger than a $1.5 billion company. They were $1.5 billion a couple years ago in the Bloomberg review I recently read. And they may be the largest manufacturer in terms of overall sales volume on Amazon. So many people know them. They're a 10-year-old company with deep roots in building well-rated consumer electronic and prosumer electronic devices. That's very different from most of the companies who make 3D printers today. Most of them have been started by engineers and enthusiasts, such as Prusa being a very good example, that build very good machines. But those machines were not built by companies that truly had a history in manufacturing. So when I look at the AnkerMake M5 and I compare it to my Prusa MK3, yes, there's a Prusa MK4 out today, and even comparing it to what I've seen of that machine, I haven't touched it, or I compare it to one of my Creality machines, or I compare it to this Sovo machine that's right behind me, the fit, the finish, the manufacturing, the packaging, it's just different. This is manufactured as a consumer-friendly machine, and that has advantages and disadvantages that we're going to talk about, because this machine, while being very, very good, is not perfect. So if you want to learn more about the AnkerMake M5, then stay tuned and let's learn something together. I want to start by thanking everyone who helps support this YouTube channel and all of the endeavors here at Make with Tech, where we strive to teach people how to use desktop technologies, 3D printers, laser engravers and cutters, a little bit of woodworking, a little bit of electronics, a little bit of software, how to use these things to make things. And one of the ways we support this channel is with our new product, which is models.makewithtech.com. At models.makewithtech.com, you can download models in order to print them on your 3D printer or to cut patterns in your laser engraver. And what's unique about it is you can customize those models right on screen. So it's completely free. We have over 5,000 people using that product today, completely free. But you also can subscribe to that product to get advanced features, and those subscriptions help support this channel. So thank you to both our free users, our subscribers, and to all my viewers. Now, I want to disclose right up front that AnkerMake sent me this printer, 2 reels of filament, some spare parts that I'm going to use as part of this video, all completely free, in exchange for a review. But it's not a guaranteed review, because in the terms and conditions I send anyone sending me product, I tell them I can decline to review your product, happy to send your product back. In this case, I'm actually honestly impressed with this product because, as I mentioned, it's different. And in general, it's better. Let's start with the basics. This is not an inexpensive machine. The price on the AnkerMake site is $800. Now, it's currently being discounted on that site. You can get it for that same discounted price on Amazon. Now, that makes a lot of sense. In fact, you can get it from Amazon next day, which is very interesting. And one of the advantages that Anker has is they're one of the largest manufacturers distributing on Amazon. So they have that logistic channel, which will allow them to send product all over the world very quickly. Currently, most of the spare parts for this product are not yet available on Amazon, but they are available directly on a store on the AnkerMake site. Because one of the things I look for when I review a 3D printer is whether parts are available. Parts are available for this printer. Okay, I'm going to move this stuff out of the way so I don't break it. And now let's walk through this printer. To start with, the build volume is pretty typical. 235 by 235 by 250. It uses an excellent removable print surface. I've never had to use any glue on this print surface, and it sticks very firmly. These are quite strong magnets, and all my prints come off without a scraper of any type. Now, I'll tell you my secret though. Now, a lot of people forget that these print surfaces are designed to grab prints when they're hot and release them when they're cool. Now, what is cool? Cool, I found, is generally below 19 to 20 degrees Celsius. That's cool. That's room temperature cool. It's not slightly warm, it's not hot, and if you don't wait for it to cool off, your prints are going to be stuck. Now, I'm not a very patient guy, so I have a very simple trick, and the trick is a fan. When a print completes, I turn my fan on high, I turn the printer off, I blow cool air on the printed part for about 3 to 5 minutes, and the prints will just literally lift off. You'll see I've printed quite a number of prints. There's no scarring at all on this print surface. Now, one thing you should know is that this printer will print a purge line at the back of the print bed. And so I was a little nervous. It was really close to the back edge. So I've started putting the print surface back about 2 or 3 millimeters from the front, just to give it a little more clearance. The next thing you'll note about this printer is there are dual belts on the Y-axis. This printer is one of the bed slinger style printers where the Y-axis moves back and forth. That's the same as the Prusa MK3, MK4. It is different than the Bamboo Labs P1P, which is another printer that compares to this, but is a Core XY printer, a box-style printer with a different architecture. A lot of people claim that on a bed slinger, you can never get great prints. On the other hand, Prusa has been using them for a long time. And the complaint is that you get a little bit of ghosting. Anytime you print really fast on any printer, you're likely to get a little bit of ghosting. Ghosting is caused by vibrations. One of the reasons I did not see any noticeable ghosting, and we'll look at some prints together and I'll show you larger versions of these prints, photographs of them, is this print is quite heavy for its size. It has a very solid base, and you'll notice that the Z-axis, and there are dual motors on the Z-axis, the Z-axis rods, the screw rods, are fully enclosed. Now that adds both structural integrity, and this appears to be all aluminum. This is a solid machine. It adds both structural integrity and probably helps reduce vibration. So you have a wide and solid base and these structural components here that I think help reduce vibration. AnkerMake also highlights that the stepper motor on this Y-axis is a bit stronger. It's a heavy-duty stepper motor. So you have dual Z, dual Y-axis belts, and the X-axis is a traditional wheel-based X-axis, very similar to all of the Creality printers. Now, one of the things you'll notice when you first turn this printer on and you home it is there are no end stops. So let me show you that. This printer takes a bit of time to boot, to power on, and the fan is a little noisy. Now I'll suppress the fan noise a bit in the video, but the fan is a little bit noisy. It takes a little longer to boot because there are actually two CPU boards in this printer. One that's running Marlin firmware. That beep told me it's connected to Wi-Fi. And a second one that's running the camera and the AI software we'll talk about in a few minutes. When I go to the front panel, and the front panel is a touch screen, it works great. That's actually one of the differences between this and, let's say, the P1P from Bamboo, which does not have a touch screen on their lower end models that compete with this. This touch screen has the ability to do all the things you're normally used to. They're very well labeled. I'm going to take and do a home on this printer so you can see what that does. You may not be able to hear it, but you actually hear the printer sort of running into the end of its range. And when you watch the Z-axis, when you have dual Z-axis motors, you need a way to make sure those motors are, stepper motors are in alignment. And this uses the same approach that Prusa uses, which it aligns each one by hitting the end individually. You'll see it do that little jiggle there at the end. So that's what homing does on this printer. This printer has built-in auto bed leveling. There are no manual leveling screws at all. I'm going to turn this off just so you can hear me a little better. However, it is important to note that under the print bed, there are 4 screws that hold the magnetic surface down. Some people have reported, mine were not, that those are sometimes loose. So a recommendation that's bouncing around the discussion groups is to loosen those 4 screws and retighten them opposite corners to ensure that's tight. Another thing you want to do when you take this printer out of the box is you want to make sure the wheels that use an eccentric nut, once again very similar in that case to Creality, are tight, and that you've tightened the belts. Now, AnkerMake has really good instructions on their website, actual videos that tell you how to do that. So I didn't go through the assembly, which is basically consists of putting this onto the base, the gantry onto the base, and bolting in the reel holder, which can go in multiple orientations, because those videos are really excellent. Now, this printer uses standard 1.75 millimeter filament. And in fact, AnkerMake sent me 2 reels of their PLA Plus. They claim their PLA Plus is optimized for high-speed printing, is stronger than traditional PLA. Now, I've printed quite a number of prints on their PLA Plus. I've also printed a number of prints in Matter Hacker's Build PLA, which is a sort of a premium, while still entry-level PLA. There is such a thing as premium and entry-level, but it's a very consistent PLA that I've used for a long time, and I find shows less layer lines than other filaments. But the prints that I made with the AnkerMake filament were a little better. Let's say that these were A minus quality prints, and these were A prints. I really can barely see the layer lines at all on these prints, and I think I had a bit less stringing on the PLA Plus prints than the MatterHacker Build PLA. We'll get back to the prints in a moment. The hot end is rated up to 260 degrees Celsius. Now that's a bit interesting, and the reason is you can see here on this hot end that there is a Teflon tube that goes into the hot end, and it goes all the way down to the nozzle. That's sort of the Creality style. The advantage of that is you get a lot less stringing. The disadvantage of that is many people say you shouldn't print above 220, 230 degrees if you have one of these Teflon tubes because they can emit gases above those temperatures. Now, this is a blue tube. It's not sort of the white low-end ones. I don't know who makes this for them. I do know that Capricorn makes a Teflon tube that can go up to higher temperatures. So I don't have confirmation of that, but I've had no trouble with this. And their slicer does something very interesting. It prints the first layer at 260 degrees Celsius. Then it drops the printer down to 200 degrees Celsius for the rest of the print. So that's somewhat unique about the hot end. As long as we're talking about the hot end, another thing that is unique is the heating element is larger than normal. And when you buy a hot end, and you can buy these for about $35, replacement hot ends, so it's worth having a spare around, it does look like the thermistor and the heating element are sort of glued in somehow. The hot part of this hot end is connected to the fins that cool the hot end with two screws that a lot of people on the web say they've had trouble with because they snap fairly easily. So you'll want to be careful about that. The nozzles in this hot end are not quite standard. While the thread is standard, they're a little bit longer than standard. So as of right now, you have to get them from Anker. The limitation is that while Anker has nozzles from 0.2 millimeters to 0.8, they only have brass nozzles right now. They don't have hardened steel nozzle. So if you want to use an abrasive material, you may have to use a non-standard nozzle, and I'm not sure how well that's going to work. The leveling on this system is completely automatic. The bed is fixed, and it levels 7 points by 7 points, so 49 points altogether. That takes a long time. It takes about 10 minutes. At the beginning of each print, however, it does sort of a quick test of 3 points across the middle, which happens very, very quickly. Now, for some of the more interesting features. This printer has a camera right here in the base of or in the bracket of the X-axis. So it moves up and down with the print. You can use that to take time lapses, to take recordings, or to do live monitoring. Time lapses and recordings are at 1080p. Live monitoring is at 720p. But there's more. Anker has a long history with AI because of their security products and their robotic vacuums, other products in their product line. They've used that expertise to build AI into this printer. Now, the reviews on the AI are mixed so far, but it's all software-based, and they keep releasing updates on a regular cadence. The AI today will detect if your print first layer is failing, it didn't stick, or if the print is failing somewhere as it goes up. When you have the AI on, the first couple layers print much slower because it actually moves the print head out of the way so it can take a picture of the first layer and compare it to what it should look like. That comparison happens because the AnkerMake Slicer sends both your G code to the printer and a special AI file. So the AI features only work with the AnkerMake Slicer. Now, when the AnkerMake Slicer sends a file to the printer, it first talks to the cloud hosted at AWS to determine where your printer is. It finds your printer, then it makes a direct connection to the printer to send the files locally at high speed. Once the files are transmitted to the printer, you can exit from the slicer. You don't have to leave it running on your machine. So it's a wonderful feature. Now, while that print is running, the whole time you can monitor the print from your phone from anywhere, because that does go through the cloud. That takes us really to the software side of the AnkerMake. And there are two parts to the software side. There's a phone application and the slicer we've already spoken about. The phone application is absolutely required. It's the only way you can set up this printer so it will be on a Wi-Fi network. Now you can print locally with a USB-C style drive, key, whatever you call your USB storage. But USB-C style keys are not as common as USB-A, but they're readily available now. But to set up the Wi-Fi, you must use the app. So you download the app to either your iOS device or your Android device. When you first start the app, one of the things that's interesting is it asks you for a region. As I mentioned, Anker had some problems with the security community, so they're very careful in this application and in the slicer to make everything region-based. So it asks you for a reason, you create a username and password, and then you have to have Bluetooth turned on your phone. So it uses Bluetooth to communicate with the printer and to add your Wi-Fi to that printer. That is an excellent design, much better than having to connect to a hotspot in the printer, which saves the manufacturer a little bit of money because they don't need the Bluetooth logic in the device, but is much harder for the consumer. The Wi-Fi configuration on this printer was seamless. It was excellent. It was very, very easy. Then you have your printer listed on here. Anytime you're doing a print, you can monitor that print either with a graphic that shows you the percent complete, you can stop a print, you can restart a print, and you can start a recording, or you can configure your printer to do time lapses for every print. Those time lapses are actually listed right on your phone. So they're under the Me key. It says Me down here in the corner. You click on time lapse and you'll see all the time lapses. Now the heavy lifting in software is done by the slicer. So let's turn to the screen for a minute and look at the AnkerMake Slicer. When it first starts, you'll see it says Slicer with a big beta tag. Now that's ironic because you can only use some of the features like AI if you're using their slicer. The AnkerMake M5 does have profiles available for Cura and Prusa. I haven't verified on Prusa, but I verified on Cura that the profile is in the current version of Cura. Otherwise, you can get those profiles on the AnkerMake website. So there are three sections. There's the slicer, there's the preview, and that also controls the starting of a print and the AI, and then you can actually watch a printer. So if you go to the slicer, it comes up in what's called easy mode. Now overall, this has a feel that it's somewhat Cura based, and I believe the underlying engine is Cura, but it may be a hybrid in some ways, because you'll see in a minute, many of the parameters are labeled differently and function a bit different. This slicer is clearly a version 1 slicer, so it doesn't have good control over supports, it doesn't have good vase mode currently. So if those features are critical for a print, I'd recommend using Cura or Prusa, but you'll give up on the AI feature. The slicer is highly tuned to optimize the speed of these prints. So you'll see here we start in easy mode. I'm going to actually load a model here. Okay, now you can see the Kickstarter test up close. I'm going to show you this actual print in a minute. And you can see just the basic features. You can click on an object, then you can move it, you can scale it, you can ensure it's on the print bed, you can rotate it, and you can mirror it. There are no features for cutting a model apart into pieces or those more advanced features. There are no multicolor settings like you see in the Prusa Slicer. However, there's a product called the V6 add-on, which is a multicolor add-on for this printer that will add 6 additional colors. It's a palette style multicolor setup. So it actually cuts pieces of filament and melts together segments of filament. So you end up with, in essence, a multicolor segment of filament that's just right for your multicolor print. It will include a new hot end. So if you upgrade to the V6, you'll get a new hot end in addition to the carousel and the splicing component. When they do that, obviously they're going to have to upgrade this slicer. Right now we're in easy mode, so all you see is speed, normal or fast. They're both fast. Normal sets the base speed at about 250 millimeters per second. Fast sets it at 500 and increases the acceleration and jerk values. In general, I found that this printer is 2 to 3 times faster than, let's say, an Ender 3 S1 Pro or an Ender 5 S1. And my Ender 5 S1, I run at about 80 millimeters per second. But the effective speed is, I'm printing things in much less than a half, sometimes a third of the time as I see on other printers. So it's very fast. And you have standard settings here. Global support doesn't mean support from them. It means add supports. If I switch to expert mode, you'll see a whole bunch of other settings that look very similar to Cura, but it starts with this AnkerMake FDM settings section. Some of these are familiar to me, some are not. So using their printer to fine-tune things is going to take a little bit of time because you have to learn about their particular setup. Here's the good news. I didn't change any parameters except for one print. I told it not to print the top and no fill. I'll explain how I printed this vase. All the other prints I either printed in normal or in fast, depending on the quality I was looking for. So you do get theoretically better quality in normal mode. You'll get less ghosting as an example because it's not moving as fast. When you slice an object, you get a preview like all modern slicers. And you can see here the layer by layer preview. I'm just scrolling through it down here. Very Cura-like. It is a very clear display. You can see all the different line types that are displayed here. And you'll see this model would print in a little over 2 hours. This is a 4 to 5 hour model on any other printer I own, except for the FL Sun V400, which is a very fast Delta printer. You can see here that you have the option of creating an AI file. That does take a little bit of extra time to download to the printer, but it's still very, very quick. When you click on print, it will generate the AI file, and then it will look for your printer. So I'm actually going to turn on this printer again. And once again, you'll notice that the fans are quite noisy. Now that fan appears to be the power supply fan. Now, Anker knows something about power supplies. They've been in that business for 10 years, so there must be a reason they use a continuous fan. You'll see it's found my printer. Oops. There we go. Now it's found the printer, and I can start the print by just clicking on print. It's now downloading the file to the printer, and then once it starts printing, once it comes up to temperature, it will show me the percent complete over here. This image is still not working in this beta release. However, I can go to my phone now, and I can go to device, and I can see on my phone exactly where it's at, including a percent completed, and I can click on real time and actually see a picture from that camera that's built in. Okay, I'm going to actually stop this print and turn that off so that it's a little quieter. So what is one of the unique features is this is an integrated system. While this printer is not perfect today, the fans are too loud, There are limitations to their slicer. If you use another slicer, you don't get the AI features. Some people have been concerned with ghosting. I haven't seen that. I can tell you this printer is very fast and has been very reliable for me. Now, let's look at some prints. I have a variety of prints here. One of the reasons was the printer's so fast and it was so consistent that I had no trouble printing a bunch of samples. Now, I didn't realize when I first got started that the sample prints are under the Explore tab in the phone app. They're not in the slicer. So I looked at the slicer, I didn't see any sample prints, so I just started printing some of my own. So I started with a very simple print, which is a calibration cat. I'll show you pictures of all these as we go. And the idea here is to check for stringing, to check for overhangs, and to check for dimensions. This is a really nice print. There's a little bit of fuzz, sort of fuzzy stringing that you can pull off with your fingers down here, but nothing really to speak of. This was printed using the AnkerMake PLA. And I will tell you, now I'm an old guy, 67 years old, so maybe my eyes aren't very good, but I can't see the layer lines in this print at all. So let's check the dimensions. So I'm going to take a caliper here. Let's reset it to 0. And let's see how big this is. Now this comes up as 20.06. So ideally it'd be 20/600ths of a millimeter. I think that's just fine. So this is pretty good in that dimension. Let's try the other dimension. And this is 20.13. This is an excellent, excellent print. Next, I printed a print that's hard to print. This is the Kickstarter sort of torture test for 3D printers. It's a really hard print to print, and in particular, it's hard to find printers that will print all of these little mini towers that end in a very fine point accurately. This might be the best Kickstarter print I've ever gotten off a printer. It's better than the original Prusa. It's better than my Ender S1 printers. And in particular, this shows you some of the advantage of having the Teflon lined hot end. So I know you can't print as hot when you have that Teflon tube in there, but you get less stringing. There is some of this sort of peach fuzz style stringing on here. I don't think you can see it. It's very, very fine. And it looks a little bit like cotton candy. It'd be trivial to pull off with my fingers. The dimensional accuracy of this print is excellent because all of these holes, all of these pins came out perfectly. The overhangs are very, very clean. And this is an area where you look for ringing. Now, once again, old eyes, and so I'll sort of try to make sure I'm focused in there. I don't see any ringing. There is one overhang right over here where there's one string of filament that drooped down. Now, when I created this print, I was thinking, well, maybe it's that PLA Plus from AnkerMake. Maybe the printer's not so good. The filament's great. So I printed the same print using Matter Hacker's Build PLA, a PLA that I get very good results from, and the results were almost identical. There's a little bit more stringing, and maybe I can see the layer lines slightly more, but everything else was identical. Still just a remarkably good print. So I wanted to do something a little bit more complex, something that would have taken a really long time to print on most of my other printers. So I printed the Statue of Liberty. Now, initially I turned on supports, but there are no selective supports in their slicer. I ended up with supports all over the place. It was terrible. So I turned off supports. I said, okay, we'll see what happens. I expected the crown here to be a problem. You'll see in the close-up. This is a really beautiful, beautiful print. And one of the things that's so nice that you see on all these prints, you can see it on the blue even better, is this textured print surface creates a really nice finish on these prints. And even this large print, when I put the fan on, I cooled it to below 20 degrees Celsius, I lifted it right off. So this is an outstanding, outstanding print. Now, then I wanted to try something else that needed dimensional integrity. So I printed two things. This is actually for a piece of sandpaper to make a little sanding stick. But what's interesting about it is it has two screws here, very small screws. And I wanted to make sure those threads would fit properly, and they fit perfectly. They fit perfectly. And then this is a lot of fun, this sort of fidget toy. And you can find this fidget toy at models.makewithtech.com. Just search for rings. And what's nice about this fidget toy on models.makewithtech.com is you're not limited to this size. If you want to make a big one to try to make like a bracelet or something fun, you can set the dimensions for this. So this is really a lot of fun. Now, one of the challenges with printing vases is that when you print them in vase mode, they're generally not watertight. They print very fast, but they're not watertight. If you print them in a traditional mode, they take a long time. Now, you can print them by telling your printer to print multiple walls, no infill, no top. They print somewhere in between the two times. This vase printed here, let me see here, I have it written down here, in 2 hours and 6 minutes. This is printed with 3 walls. I filled it with water. It's completely watertight. I have 3 walls and 3 layers on the base. You can hear this is a solid vase. Now this vase has an advantage. Because of the ribbing, there's a place for the slicer to hide the seam. Because when you print in vase mode, you're printing a continuous line. You're printing in traditional mode, you're printing a layer, going up, printing a layer. Each time you go up, you get a seam. If you look at this really carefully, I can't find one, well, I can find one right here. You can see that the slicer did a pretty good job of hiding the seam along these ribs in sort of random places. Here it looks like there's another seam. So if you had a completely smooth object, you would see the seam using this approach. But this printer is capable of printing hollow objects that are very strong, very, very quickly. So now let's put that in perspective. So I sliced the same vase with the same settings on my Ender 5 for my Ender 5 S1. It took, as I said, 2 hours and 9 minutes here. It would have taken 5 hours and 40 minutes at least on the Ender 5. So that just gives you an idea of how much faster this printer is than many other printers. Well, folks, I hope you learned something today. What's my overall impression? This is a really good machine. It is expensive. So this is basically an $800 machine. There are some limitations. The software is still evolving. It's a very big company supporting this. I expect it will get better, but the software is still evolving. The fan in the power supply is very loud. And there have been reports from a lot of people about quality issues. Their prints are failing when they first get their printer. Generally, these devices, now mine didn't require this, but generally all 3D printers, when I get them, I check that all of the belts, all of the wheels, everything is screwed and tightened down. In fact, the belts on here, I can tell by moving this manually, are set very tight. Now, because of that, I ended up with excellent, excellent print quality. Well, folks, thanks for watching. If you can afford $800 for a 3D printer, this is a really good choice. There are other printers that are lower priced for more casual use. This is a printer that I would consider in a true small business prosumer setting. And one of the things that makes that so possible is parts like this hot end are reasonably priced. So if you need to replace them periodically, you can. Thanks for watching this video. I hoped you learned something. If you did, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, go to models.makewithtech.com and download and customize some models. Go to forum.makewithtech.com to show me pictures of what you're making. Have a great day, and let's continue to learn things. together.